President Trump says he wants an end to the nuclear standoff with Iran. Is it possible, and at what cost? Israel's ambassador to the United States joins us to discuss. Lawmakers, federal, state, and local, now calculate the risk of public service not from political defeat, but from violence. Minnesota Senator Tina Smith explains. The Trump administration is canceling money towns use to recover from natural disasters. Many Trump counties are feeling the pain. They don't like it. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. President Trump huddled with his national security team this afternoon after an abrupt departure from the G7 summit in Canada. The topic, you guessed it, Iran. On social media, the president said he knows where the supreme leader of that theocratic dictatorship is hiding. But for the time being, he wrote, the U.S. will not try to kill him. The U.S. did move warplanes into the region and reposition ships already there. These military moves prompted a somewhat angry debate on social media within the president's MAGA base about the possibility of a new war and how close Iran actually is to possessing a nuclear weapon and the means to deliver it. The question before the White House appears to be this. Does it allow Israel alone to continue striking Iranian targets in the hope that it can degrade Iran's nuclear program, or does the U.S. come in with heavier bombs and bigger planes to inflict massive, possibly irrevocable damage? CBS News can report the president is considering that second option. For more on all this, I want to turn to Ed O'Keefe on the North Lawn of the White House. Ed, it's been a very hectic day at the White House. Pronouncements on social media, meetings in the Situation Room. Catch us up.
Well, first off, let's recall he got here before the sun came up, back from the G7 summit, where he took off after midnight Alberta time and arrived back having told reporters on the way back that he's not seeking a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. He wants the full end of Iran's nuclear program, and that today was going to be sort of a wait and see, let's see where things are going kind of day. And so he has spent the entire day out of the public eye ever since that interaction with reporters early this morning, meeting, as you said, with his national security team, including the vice president, the secretary of state, who doubles as the national security advisor, his top Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth. And the big issue was, should Israel and the United States join together to take out the remainder of Iran's nuclear program, perhaps most notably the Fordow nuclear enrichment site, which is embedded inside mountains and would require 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs dropped by B-2s to penetrate and destroy, and something that only the United States can do if they want to do it that way. Whether or not he made a decision on that at this hour, just after 5 p.m. in the East, we don't know. And we haven't seen the president since he returned back to explain a decision or to talk about today's developments or any other plans. But we know that he's been meeting with his team to talk about it, and of course abruptly left that summit. Part of the reason he left the summit, Major, and for those that followed along during the first term and know the president's ebbs and flows, he's not a big fan of that specific summit and most of these international meetings, simply because he just doesn't like all the pleasantries and having to share the stage and prefers being back here with full control. There may have also been some concerns about making sure he was able to keep on top of things should the situation get really fluid, and be able to do that from here at the White House and in the Situation Room.
Ed, we don't often talk about a social media debate about something within the MAGA movement because it is usually right aligned with the White House, but not today. And there was a lot of skepticism within the MAGA world about the intelligence, about Iran, so much so that Vice President J.D. Vance had to weigh in with an extensive reply. Walk us through that.
An extensive and really extraordinary kind of defense of the president in the social space that came around 11 a.m. this morning. And he said, look, I'm seeing all this chatter, but I'm on the inside, and I can tell you that the president has been amazingly consistent over time about Iran and the fact that it should not be able to develop a nuclear weapon. In fact, 10 years and 1 day ago, when he began his first campaign for the White House, ever since, he's been consistent, Vance suggested. He raises some concerns. They may want civilian nuclear energy, but then why are they developing it in a way that would suggest they're trying to a point where they can enrich that uranium and use it in weaponry? Hasn't seen a reason why they need to do that. notes that the IAEA rules have been violated, and then suggests, look, the president has shown remarkable restraint in keeping our military's focus on protecting our troops and protecting our citizens, which in the last week he certainly has. Vance continues, he may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president. And of course, he says, people are right to be worried about foreign entanglement after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy. That speaks to the criticism that the president, his movement, has had, especially about George W. Bush's decision to go into war in Iraq, for the Obama and Biden administrations to continue it, and for his general belief that the United States shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. It may be on the verge of doing it now, and it is notable that after a few days of several key conservative commentators and others in the movement raising questions and lawmakers like Rand Paul saying he shouldn't do it, the vice president is essentially laying out the permission space for the possibility the president takes that step.
Ed O'Keefe in the North Lawn of the White House, thank you very much. I want to turn now quite literally to Kelly O'Grady, who joins me. It's so great to have you here at the family table. So we're talking about Iran, Israel, and global oil markets today had a reaction quite different than what it was late last week.
Yeah, I mean, over the past week, oil has soared. We were roughly in the mid-60s per barrel, and now we're above 75. I mean, that's a big jump. We're nowhere near where we were summer of 2022, right? That was above $100 a barrel. So, I mean, I just want to level set there.
Correct.
When Russia invaded Ukraine. But this is really important. I mean, think about it. We're going into the summer months. Gas prices, that can move very, very quickly, but that also flows through to pretty much everything. When you have oil prices rise, you have diesel prices rise. I mean, that's how trucks get your and my Amazon packages, our groceries, our cell phones when we go buy them at the store. And the fear from investors is that we could see something like we did with Russia, Ukraine in that summer.
And as I understand it, Kelly, it's not just about supply, which is one enormous important part of this. It's also about infrastructure to generate future supply or keep existing supplies available.
Yeah, it's kind of a double whammy of what you see going on here, because on the supply front, the Strait of Hormuz, that's where roughly 20 to 30% of the world's oil travels through. Iran in the past, and they have also this time around threatened, saying, hey, we're potentially not gonna let that supply through. That's a concern. But then on the demand side, you do see targets being hit. When a bomb goes off and you're not able to produce some of that supply, I mean, that's a problem when infrastructure gets hit. So there's sort of a double concern here when it comes to oil prices.
Kelly, you're here in Washington again. I'm so glad to have you here. Federal Reserve tomorrow. It has been hesitant, needing more data because it's an uncertain economic environment. I would say, hello, another aspect of uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, even going into this, before last week, we knew that this was going to be a pause on interest rates. That's what markets are pricing in right now. And the reason— Meaning no change. Meaning no change, that interest rates are going to be held steady. And the reason is you don't know. Chair Powell doesn't feel comfortable with where tariff policy is going to influence inflation over the next few months, doesn't want to do anything that would spur demand. But now that you have these oil prices and just this concern about where inflation could go even more so, it's definitely going to be a wait and see. But this is not about the rate decision tomorrow. This is about the press conference and what we're going to be asking him about, what his reaction to the president's comments, right?
And how you sift all the things that Fed Chair Powell has to say.
Exactly.
Kelly O'Grady, you'll be back here tomorrow, I hope?
Oh, I will be.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to walk over to the conversation corner now because I'm going to be joined by the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Leiter, as Kyle and Inja bring the touchscreen closer here to the conversation corner. Mr. Ambassador, it's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. Let me ask you what I think is a kind of threshold—
Good to be with you, Major. Thank you.
A threshold question. Can Israel, by itself, sufficiently degrade Iran's nuclear program to the place where it can feel safe?
Well, we believe we can. We believe we have to. For us, this is an existential issue. It's to be or not to be, and we've chosen to be. So we're going to do everything we can to eliminate the threat to our survival. A nuclear bomb in the hands of the Iranian mullahs is a threat to our survival. Ballistic missiles, tens of thousands of ballistic missiles with the potential for nuclear warhead is a threat to our survival. And we've got to do whatever we can to prevent that from happening.
Analysts have said that it's not possible for Israel to get to some of the most underground and buried parts of the Iranian nuclear program. and that to sufficiently and for a long period of time degrade or destroy that nuclear program, Israel would have to have U.S. assistance, specifically, and Ed O'Keefe, my colleague at the White House, just mentioned this, bunker-busting bombs. Is that not true?
Well, you know, that's the big subject of the day, but I'm not going to go there. You know, analysts said for many years that, you know, we couldn't eliminate the surface-to-surface missiles, the surface-to-air missiles. We couldn't get through the Iranian defenses. We couldn't possibly deal with the IRGC. Well, look, you know, the supreme leader right now looks to his left, and he has no nuclear scientists to left. He can't see them. He looks to his right, and he has no generals left in the IRGC. This terrorist infrastructure is crumbling. It's coming down. We're bringing it down day after day. We're ahead of schedule. And I think we still have a few surprises up our sleeves as well. Don't underestimate the power of the Israel Air Force and the ingenuity of our defense industry.
Mr. Ambassador, you just mentioned surprises up your sleeve. Either yesterday or earlier this morning, trust me, things move fast. I know you know that as well as I do. You mentioned that the world may see something more sophisticated in Iran than what it saw in Lebanon, with beepers taking out significant leaders within Hezbollah. Were you referring to something that has already happened or something that may happen in the future?
No, I was referring actually to what has already happened. Thursday night when we began the operation, we had simultaneous attacks that nobody foresaw and nobody really understands how it was done, how it was accomplished. And I said that in the coming days and weeks, when the dust settles on this war and we've achieved our goal of neutralizing Iran's nuclear program, the world is going to see just how the extent of our ingenuity. And just as it took some time to understand how the beeper operation was carried out, how we carried out last Thursday night is also going to be studied, and I think it's going to wow a lot of people.
I'm a kind of simple person, Mr. Ambassador, and it's impossible for me to imagine how Israel could have achieved what you just outlined inside Iran without people willingly turning their back on the existing leadership and assisting Israel. That has to be true at some level. You're going to either confirm or deny that, but that suggests to me there is something possibly rickety in new ways about the Iranian theocratic leadership. Do you believe that to be true?
Well, Major, we know it to be true. You know, Prime Minister Netanyahu sends a video message to the Iranian people every other Friday. It receives millions and millions of responses. The people of Iran want freedom. And it's no surprise that there would be people who would cooperate with us for many, many years. You know, if only the opposition in Iran could get together and express themselves. We're dealing with a horrific theocratic regime that suppresses dissent. You know, you've got 15,000 political prisoners in the Ayatollah's prisons. That's just an astounding figure. I mean, this is back into the Middle Ages where they have thrust Iran. Iran is a very creative, the Iranians are a creative people with a marvelous history and tremendous potential. And the vast majority want to live with us and their neighbors in peace. I think if the outcome of this operation against the nuclear program is successful and we facilitate the Iranian people to rise up and choose a different government, I think it'll be a great accomplishment, and history will be kind to us for helping to facilitate that happening. It's not our agenda. That's not our goal. Our goal is not regime change. Our goal is to secure our future and terminate this malevolent intent on the part of the Mullah regime. But if it happens, we're certainly going to celebrate that outcome.
Mr. Ambassador, you've been kind enough to stay for our next segment. Please hold on. We're going to do a couple of commercial breaks, pay a couple of bills. We'll be back on the other side of this conversation with more with our ambassador from Israel to the United States, Michael Leiter. Still to come, the administration is cutting FEMA funds from Trump counties. How that could undercut efforts to prepare for the next disaster.
Any person that flooded is shocked that it would be considered politics to do flood mitigation.
It's called swatting, hoax 911 calls that have endangered dozens of lawmakers and others in public life. Plus, a plea for humanity in the wake of a nightmare. Minnesota Senator Tina Smith describes her talk with Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee about his social media post that appeared to mock the fatal shooting of a Minnesota lawmaker. All that ahead on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Continuing our conversation with the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Leiter. Mr. Ambassador, as you well know, it's a three-tiered process for any nuclear power. You first have to develop the nuclear material. You have to put it in a deliverable system, meaning a bomb. And then you have to have a targeting mechanism by which you can deliver that lethal weapon. What does Israel know about Iran's capabilities in all three categories?
We know that they've moved very close to the precipice in all three categories. They will have a deliverability of a nuclear weapon within a matter of weeks, and our intel showed that very clearly. The damning report of the IAEA, which came out on the 60th day of the warning letter that the president sent to the Ayatollah, indicated that and really vindicated what our prime minister has been saying for 15 years. They're racing to a nuclear bomb, and we had to stop it. I think it's very important to appreciate what we're talking about. What we're talking about when we talk about the mullahs, the Ayatollah of Tehran. This is a government that sent assassination squads to assassinate the President of the United States twice. This is a Ayatollah who sent an assassination squad to take out former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. It's the same Ayatollah that sits in the middle of Tehran with thousands of people and screams, "Death to America, death to Israel, death to the West." A nuclear bomb in the hands of somebody screaming death to America, it doesn't add up.
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned Prime Minister Netanyahu warning for 15 years about this prospect. That came up in social media conversation that the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, felt the need to address today because some in the Make America Great movement were writing on social media, Israel's been howling, their words, not mine, about this for years and years and years. Why should we believe them now when they said Iran was on the cusp of this 6 years ago, 8 years ago, some number of years longer ago than that?
Well, I certainly don't want to get involved in a domestic discussion about policy. I just know one thing, that we don't have a second chance. 80 years ago, somebody ran around Europe saying he'd like to terminate the Jews of Europe. He was a malevolent actor in the international scene. He caused chaos in the countries around him, and everybody appeased him. They said, well, we'll give it time. We'll try to see if negotiations and diplomacy will work. At the end of the day, avoiding that war caused a war that took 65 million lives and 6 million Jews in gas chambers. We're not there again. This war that we're prosecuting against Iran is the war to end wars, to make sure that we can move into a mode of an Abraham Accord Middle East where countries line up to normalize relations with Israel. And we're quite convinced that that's where we're going. We had 4 countries in the first Trump administration to make peace with us. And we think that in Trump 2.0, there are going to be many more that are going to line up to make peace. As soon as this menace of a potential nuclear Iran is removed from the scene.
And, Mr. Ambassador, just to make it clear, if I hear you correctly, the United States does not need to be a participant militarily, directly, for you to achieve the goal you just outlined.
The president has a very clear agenda. He has a very clear understanding of the international community. I think he has a very clear understanding of the threat that Iran poses to the United States and to the world. And the president and his administration will take a decision, and Israel stands by the best friend that it ever had in the White House in President Trump, and we're confident in our partnership. We're confident in our ally. We thank the United States for the defensive systems that they put at our disposal that have saved hundreds and thousands of lives in these THAAD and Aegis missile defense systems over the past couple of days, and we're very appreciative looking into the future as well.
Mr. Ambassador, going forward, what is the risk profile for Israeli civilians? Acknowledging what you just said, there is a missile defense system, a robust one, and if I heard you correctly, Israel has dramatically degraded Iran's ability to continue to fire ballistic missiles. What is the risk profile for your civilians?
There's a risk that still exists, unfortunately. We haven't completely demolished the surface-to-surface missiles that the Iranians are firing. You know, they fire by intention into densely populated civilian areas. When we strike into Iran, we tell the people to leave first. That's the fundamental inherent difference between our two societies, between our two governments, and the way we behave. We will continue. We're pursuing every day the process of taking out these surface-to-surface missiles, these ballistic missiles that they're firing at us. And we've demolished about half of their inventory. And as the days go on, we're going to remove the rest of them from threatening our civilians.
Israeli Ambassador to the United States, Michael Leiter. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for your time. I hope you'll come back.
Good to be with you, Major.
Thank you. Senator Tina Smith, Minnesota, confronts Mike Lee of Utah over posts he made blaming Democrats, or appearing to do so, for the fatal shooting of a Democratic Minnesota lawmaker. I'll speak with Senator Smith next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Here is a look at what else we, and now you, are watching this evening. Senate Republicans released their version of the Trump tax bill. We talked about that a smidge last night, and what they released, well, met criticism from House Republicans and generated internal doubts that that bill can pass before the self-imposed Independence Day deadline. Some specifics: steeper cuts to Medicaid funding, smaller deductions for state and local taxes, and believe me, that is a political sore point with House Republicans from New York, New Jersey, and California. Also, a $5 trillion, with a T, trillion-dollar increase in the debt ceiling, $1 trillion above the limit set in the House bill. Both versions would move that very touchy issue past the midterm elections. Former New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez reported to federal prison today. He was sentenced to 11 years for bribery and taking actions on behalf of a foreign government without registering. Menendez traded favors for cash, gold bars, and a Mercedes-Benz. MyPillow founder Mike Lindell was found guilty in his defamation case and has been ordered to pay $2.3 million in damages. Lindell called the Dominion voting systems director a traitor and posted accusations that Dominion was somehow involved in election stealing. Lindell said he plans to appeal that verdict. President Trump has ordered a renewal of ICE raids on farms and hotels. This reversal comes just days after he posted on Truth Social that those aggressive raids were hurting farmers and hotel workers. The administration is working to reach a quota of some 3,000 immigration arrests from workplaces and other parts of the country. To Minnesota, where CBS News' Lilia Luciano has spoken to the family of State Representative Melissa Hortman. She and her husband, Mark, were killed over the weekend in a politically motivated shooting. Here is some of that conversation with Hortman's father.
I'm sure you have in your mind how you want your daughter to be remembered. What do you want people to know?
She treated everyone with respect, even when a number of people have called us that competed against her and just spoke so highly of how she treated them. And she remembered the golden rule always, and that's the way she lived her life.
I want to bring in Minnesota Democratic Senator Tina Smith. Senator Smith, as you probably know, this show has an attachment to the Twin Cities. It's once a week iteration. It was on WCCO for years. It's on WCCO now 5 days a week. I grieve for your community. This show grieves for your community. And there, as you know, Senator, is a relentlessness to tragic stories like this. We move on so rapidly. I don't want to move on rapidly. I want you to help my audience understand who Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were. They're now dead as an act of political assassination. And who John Hoffman and his wife Yvette is. They were wounded and they're survivors.
Oh, Major, I so appreciate that, because in this world that we live in, this fast-paced world, we inevitably move on to the next thing, and I cannot move on from losing my friend Melissa and her husband gunned down in their front entryway, and my very good friends John and Yvette Hoffman. You know, we were all together the night before this happened in a big, joyous party celebration, and I am still just shattered by their loss. And I wish everybody could know who Melissa Hortman was. She was just intrepid. She was indomitable. She had just a kick-ass sense of humor. And she didn't just want to talk about problems, she wanted to fix them, which made her such a consummate legislator.
How are you doing, and your staff doing, and people in Minnesota in public life and near those in public life? How much fear are you working through?
Well, I mean, you don't just get over something like this. And Melissa and Mark's killing, and then the assassination attempt on John Hoffman and his wife was a personal tragedy, but it also is an assault on our democracy. And so trying to think about all of those things together and keep them front and center at our minds at the same time we're thinking about the broad-based ramifications of what this means. And of course, we know that this assassin, we know that this was politically motivated. We know that he had a list of other elected officials and community leaders that he was intending to murder. And all of that is very much on people's minds as they're trying to figure out what is happening to our country and what does this mean for Minnesota that has always put so much faith and trust and pride in our sense of civic duty and obligation and working together in the civil society to make our state better.
What should this mean for protection of members of Congress, House and Senate?
We were having a conversation about that today, and I believe that we have to do a lot of work to understand what we can do to keep people safe. You know, taking on these roles, these jobs as elected leaders should not be a life or death decision. And the just irrevocable ramping up of violent rhetoric and violent action is just, you can't deny it. You know, I serve with Mark Kelly, whose wife Gabby was shot, and her life was forever changed because of that terrible attack. And that was in 2011. And since then, we just see this constant ratcheting up. And I mean, let's just be honest, when you have the President of the United States pardoning people who attacked the base of our government operations and people who committed assault against police officers, the dynamic of what this really means in our country today just seems very, very challenging. I think we're at a tipping point. We can either take a step back and try to figure out how to reclaim the civic ground, or we are going to inevitably continue down this path of more violence and more chaos. And we cannot let that be the path that we choose.
Senator Smith, social media is a place in the aftermath of events that your community has just experienced can be an ugly and rude and crude place. You confronted one of your Senate colleagues over something you found in one of those three categories. Explain to my audience what happened and what set you off.
My colleague Mike Lee from Utah posted in the aftermath of these killings a picture of the man who killed my friend and the Speaker Emerita of Minnesota, presumably from a security camera shortly before he gunned down these Minnesotans. And so he posted this picture twice, one with a feeble joke about our governor, Governor Walz, and the other with a message that basically says, this is what you get. This is what happens if Marxists don't get their way. It was so hurtful to people to think that he would use this tragic occasion as a way to try to, score points on social media. So I wanted to talk to him directly about this instead of engaging through others or sending off a social media post of my own. I wanted to talk to him directly. So I found him yesterday, and I told him exactly what pain he had caused by this, and I asked him to think about why he had done it and to take responsibility for what he was saying on social media, where he had well over nearly 8 million people engage with his tweet. This afternoon, he is elected to take both of those down. I'm glad for that, but I am awaiting any sign that he has a sense of what he did, what impact it had on people in Minnesota and around the country.
Did he apologize to you personally?
No, he did not. And what about apologizing to John Hoffman and his wife Yvette? What about apologizing to Melissa and Mark's children who are in their 20s and have just lost both of their parents? And he used the person who murdered their parents as a way to, accomplish something on social media that was just only to benefit him. It's shameful.
The President of the United States was asked, flying back from the G7 summit, whether or not he intended to call the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. He said that would be a waste of time. How do you interpret that?
Well, I heard the governor today respond to this similar question, and the governor noted that he's received outreach from so many people expressing condolences, as have I. I think this is just another example of how the President of the United States is not in touch at all with the humanity of people and what has happened to people. This isn't about politics in the sense that people have lost their loved ones. And he is so quick to pardon people who commit violence on his behalf, but yet he cannot hold accountable people. He can't hold people accountable. It's shameful.
Senator Smith, these are turbulent times, and there was another episode that happened last week to one of your colleagues, California Senator Alex Padilla. He went to the Senate floor today to talk about that experience. And the takeaway was, he said, look, if what happened to me, being thrown to the ground, handcuffed, can happen with cameras rolling to a United States senator, imagine what will happen and probably what has happened in this country when cameras aren't present and the person being roughed up by authorities under whatever power of law are less than senators.
Yeah. I mean, we see this every day. We don't have to imagine because we can see it. We've seen people show up for immigration hearings and then be ripped away from their children and detained. We've seen these raids where people are given no due process. And Alex's speech today on the Senate floor was so powerful because he did such a good job of connecting what happened to him to what this means for our country in this moment. And I want people to understand something that I didn't fully understand until I spoke with Alex, that he went into this federal building in California with he was escorted in by an FBI agent. And when the Secretary of Homeland Security's security detail approached him and hauled him out, the FBI agent was just standing there and did not do anything to clarify who Senator Padilla was. So it's shocking, really. And to be forced to your knees and then forced face down on the floor, as Senator Padilla was, while all they needed to do was to just simply ask, show me your identification, who are you? But they didn't do that. They chose to show their ability to force him in ways that is just really, it's shocking.
Is there a way, Senator Smith, for the country to escape what feels like a kind of numbness right now?
Well, I tried to demonstrate that yesterday by approaching Senator Lee in person, and not with anger or attacking, but to say, let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk about what this really means for people. And I have great faith in the people of this country, in their interactions, their human interactions with one another, to stay in touch with their humanity and their sense of connection and the things that bind us together in our communities and in our country. But we have to lift that up instead of just constantly trying to figure out how to fuel the fire. And I think that is what gives me hope, but I also feel that this is a very grave moment in our country's history. We've had tough moments before, but this feels deeply challenging, and I just hope that everybody will stay in touch with their core humanity and try to not get caught up in all of this hatred and division.
Minnesota Democratic Senator Tina Smith. Senator Smith, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Lawmakers on edge. It's an ongoing conversation. Elected officials look to protect themselves after this weekend's political violence in Minnesota. More on the many different layers of that process next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to the Takeout. This just in. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has been hospitalized here in D.C. due to an allergic reaction. Sources tell CBS News Noem was brought to the George Washington University Hospital here in D.C. downtown, and Noem is conscious and speaking with those around her. We will bring you further updates as we receive them. In the wake of the Minnesota shooting, lawmakers are calling for more personal security. Tennessee Republican Congressman Tim Burchett said that members of Congress need round-the-clock security protection. He wrote, quote, "The threats are constant." A Capitol security official briefed senators about security precautions today. Speaking afterward, multiple lawmakers said more funding is necessary in order to keep them, their staff, and possibly their families safe. This heightened risk of violence, and it is that, includes something called swatting. That's when someone makes a false emergency call to lure a SWAT team to a target's home. Multiple members of Congress have been victims of this in the past few years. Our Scott McFarland joins me now. Scott, walk us through this.
This is pernicious. This is a new wave of threats. And in fact, our latest CBS News reporting is dozens of members of Congress and elected officials have been hit in recent months. It's not just one or two. The number's expanding. So a swatting is when somebody tries to menace somebody famous, a public official, somebody on social media, by making a false emergency call to 911, gets the SWAT team to respond, and maybe aspires to have some type of confrontation between the police and the person at that home. It is scary to the person in the house, scary to their family, to their kids, and that's part of the goal. But what we found in our reporting is that some of the swatters, including those targeting lawmakers, are almost broadcasting it cryptically to an audience to try to incentivize others to do it. This is a contagion, and you're seeing the first sign of it spreading.
And I'm just trying to add a couple of things together, Scott. What happened in Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities this weekend, is someone, an assailant, posing as a police officer, arrived in the middle of the night, banging on doors saying, "Police, let me in." So let's just take that and this swatting. Authorities arrive. You don't know why they're there. Suddenly, the fear factor, it seems, goes right off the chart.
It's a shot of nitroglycerin to swatting in general, because you have this inherent trust in police when they're at your door. You have to, or else
the whole system breaks down.
The whole system breaks down. And if you find a way to knock down or destabilize the trust people have in police, these swatting incidents could be far more destructive and violent, and more deaths and accidents can happen. And what you had in Minnesota wasn't just somebody pretending to be a police officer, according to investigators, but you heard what they said yesterday. It was a, quote, hyper-realistic silicone mask to better imitate a police officer, with a fake license plate on a vehicle that it was souped up to be a police car. This is all potentially exacerbating the issue.
Back to swatting. Two issues, it seems to me. One, it dilutes resources that need to go elsewhere. And two, is it a defined crime, and are people being prosecuted for this defined or now recently defined crime?
When they can catch them, because this is often done by people who are quite good at making cryptic who they are and anonymizing themselves. What we see is there's federal charges for swatting that can happen. We've seen one case that popped recently, a Romanian national being prosecuted right here in Washington, D.C., accused of targeting members of Congress, faces a long prison term if he's convicted or if he pleads guilty. But got to catch him first. One thing I'll note, one congressman from upstate New York told me he's reached out to police to have them call him before arriving if they get a 911 call from his address, to avoid any of these interactions. He's been swatted before. He knows how this goes.
And so police are trying to figure out tactical ways to sift through this, maybe separate real from unreal.
But they don't want to slow down their responses.
Right.
You don't want to take the foot off the gas pedal, because quick response is so critical in emergency situations. Yes, some public figures say, call me on your way if you get a 911 call from my house, but don't slow down your response to my own.
Call and speed up. Yeah. Scott McFarland, as always, great stuff. Thank you so much. It's the nation's disaster safety net, but now the president wants to end it or cut it back significantly. How reductions in FEMA funding could have a significant impact on many communities around our country that supported the president in 2024. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back. A CBS News investigation finds that recent Trump administration cuts to FEMA's storm preparation program are overwhelmingly impacting communities that backed the president. CBS Evening News anchor Maurice Dubois went to the town of Central Louisiana, which was hit by historic flooding in 2016. And while there, he spoke to Central's mayor, Wade Evans.
Any person that flooded is shocked that it would be considered politics to do flood mitigation.
What should it be considered?
It should be considered common sense. To me, it's a brilliant business decision.
In Louisiana alone, 34 grants totaling $185 million were eliminated. A CBS News investigation found Republican-leaning places, such as Central, are bearing the brunt of cuts. 2/3 of counties that have lost their funding chose President Trump over Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. Earlier this month, Evans went to Washington to lobby his lawmakers, but says he was told it's up to the White House to reinstate the funding. 80% of this community voted for the president.
Yes.
If you and anyone else in the community had a moment with him, what would you say to him?
I would tell him, Mr. President, it's time to put the bomb away and pull out the scalpel. And let's look at these projects for the merit of what they do, not politics.
And Maurice Dubois is here now. Maurice, it's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for this reporting and your perspective. What did the White House, if anything, say to you when you and the team asked?
If anything, they had no comment, Major. However, FEMA did talk to us. They responded by saying, look, they see it as political. They see it as about climate change and politics more than anything else. Obviously, the mayor of Central there would beg to differ.
And as I understand it, Maurice, these are resilience grants meant to mitigate and help communities prepare before the next disaster comes. If that grant money is eliminated, what options do these communities have?
Yeah, in the case of Central, it was $40 million. They're just basically out of luck at the moment. They're going to try to go back to FEMA and any other sources they can think of and try to apply under a different program or some other means. But, you know, it doesn't look great. The director of DHS, Christy Noem, she runs FEMA, of course, oversees it. And she recently sent out a memo. Our reporting shows that she sent a memo that told everyone in the department, anyone asking for grants, $100,000 or more, it has to go through her approval only. So you can extrapolate out of that. The likelihood isn't great.
Maurice, you and I both know that there is a firm resilience within the Trump MAGA world. Did you detect in your travels any buyer's remorse over this issue?
Good question. 8 out of 10 people there in the county voted for Donald Trump. The mayor, he's a Republican. I asked him directly, would you vote for him again? And he said, given the choices, I would. Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. But that leaves open the possibility if there were somebody else, he might change his mind. Only he knows the answer to that one, Major.
Indeed. Maurice Dubois, excellent reporting. Thanks so much for being with us.
You bet. Thanks. Good to be with you.
Time to say farewell for today. Tomorrow, I'll be joined by Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Congressman Greg Casar, who is joining Senator Bernie Sanders for rallies in Texas this weekend. Stick around. Daily Report coming up next right here on CBS News 24/7.